Hello, and welcome to the Spoonie Authors Podcast, a podcast where we explore the life and stories of a different disabled author every other Friday. I'm your host, Diana Gunn, and joining us today is Alechia Dow. Alechia Dow is a former pastry chef, food critic, culinary teacher, and youth services librarian. When not writing YA sci-fi featuring determined Black girls like herself, you can find her having epic dance parties with her daughter, baking, or mentoring. Hello, Alechia.
Hi.
I'm very excited to have you on and to talk about your book, The Sound of Stars. Tell us about this magical book.
Okay, so The Sound of Stars is about a rebel teen librarian. Um, After aliens have invaded and made books, stories, music, everything that's human expression illegal, and a music-loving alien boy and their unlikely friendship on a road trip to possibly save humanity. It's a road trip and it's a love letter to stories and songs, and it's really, really, really fun.
Awesome. So let's start with this world that you established here. You have made, well, these aliens have made storytelling and all forms of creative expression illegal, which is absolutely terrifying. Where did this idea come from? What gave you this idea for a world?
I think I just I had this idea of a girl hiding books in her locker, and I just kind of saw this thought over and over and over again, and like this visual, and I thought, okay, I really want to write a story about a rebel librarian and why she would want to be hiding her books and but still want to give them out. And then it kind of snowballed into this idea because I also love aliens and I love science fiction a lot. So it kind of snowballed into this great idea. And then I thought, it is fascinating how humans express themselves and how that might be dangerous to an outsider, an outside creature who would not understand how humans express themselves through these different creative arts. So I thought it would be really fun to see how aliens would respond to that and to kind of make it illegal, but also needing to help other people and to give them the escape they desire, even if they can't physically escape because they're all trapped in a building.
So tell us a little bit about these aliens. So is it that they feel threatened by creativity? This is why they've outlawed it?
There are two different types of aliens in the story. The true Allori, who are kind of bodiless, they are like masses of energy. And then they've created another type called lab-made Alloris, who were modeled after humans to kind of go into Earth and take over Earth from the humans and make it a vacation destination for aliens. It's really
Oh,
fun, and it is.
space
The
tourism.
really bad, yeah, it's like space tourism. The problem is that they want to upload their consciousness into human husks. So they want to get rid of all of humans' insides, their brains and their memories and everything, and use their bodies as an absolute vacation destination where they can live like the locals, um, because they are bodiless, and they're just masses. So that's the thought that went into them being like this, and at the same time they don't want emotion because they've modeled these lab made Allori after the humans, and they feel just like the humans do. And that kind of division between the true lab made and the true Allori and the lab made Allori could be very bad for them going forward. So they want to make sure that the lab made Alloris, the creatures they've created, stay on their side.
And are
And
too influenced by human
yeah,
creativity.
they
I
don't
see.
want them to be influenced. They don't want them to be like feel bad. They want them to do as they're told. And so they have outlawed human expression and anything that can make them feel.
This is a fascinating setup. I can't wait. I have not read this book yet, but I have ordered it, and I
Oh,
cannot wait for it to arrive.
I hope you like it.
So tell me a little bit more about this secret library. You already sort of touched on, why this was an idea that spoke to you, but why was it so important for you to create this space in this world? And why do you think it's important in general to create space for creativity?
I think for me, as a former librarian, um, the idea of not being able to give people books is just it's unbelievable. Like I just can't function. I really need to be able to tell people, hey, you need to read this story, and hey, look at this book. Let's talk about this book. Um, so for me, that's a really big change for humanity to not be able to express their joys and escape from their reality with stories and songs. And I wanted to really kind of show how an invading force could take that away from them, and why they would rebel against that in the small ways they can rebel against that. Personally, I think that I'm always open to escapism, always. And I think because I've had the life I've had, and I've experienced the things I've had, I find that books, movies, music, these things help me live my life the best way I can. And if those things were taken away from me, would I also rebel? Yes. So I wanted to create a character that would also rebel, but also be have this kind of mentality of, do I want to save Earth based on how it's treated, based on how humans have treated me over the years, based on the issues we already have, and or do I want to quietly rebel, even if it means my life, just so that I can provide escapism for other people who are trapped here with me. And that's really the kind of moral dilemma that Ellie, the main character, faces throughout the story is, do I want to save this? Can I change this? What have I learned from stories that makes me a better person for it? And how can I be inspired by these stories to change the world that I am living in and experiencing right now?
I love that. I think that that really resonates with me. I feel like that's a big part of, that's something we all have to deal with when we are doing our own creative work. It's not quite the same, it's not illegal, but when we do tackle subjects, especially, as disabled writers of varying marginalized identities,
Yeah.
there's going to be a political rebellious aspect to our work. And, we have to be aware of that and comfortable with it and know how much we want to lean into it and how much we're, willing to put ourselves out there like that.
It's exactly like that. I think because Ellie is has the same identities as me, and the marginalizations that I do. I think it was very interesting to tell her story in a way where it's the future and it's aliens, but it's also very contemporary in another way of, okay, so the aliens have taken over your Earth, and you no longer have access to your medicine to feel good. What are you going to do? You no longer have access to all the things that comfort you when you need it. What are you going to do? How are you going to get through this? And I think that her way of dealing with it is to make sure that she's able to give people books because she knows she needs them. And that's how she copes in her own way. But at no point is there kind of a magical solution for all of her issues. She really has to kind of make do with what she has and find a way to embrace those stories and then kind of live her own adventure. And it's really difficult, but it was inspiring to write.
Well, it sounds lovely. And that note actually leads us really beautifully into my next question, which is not so much about the joys of it, but did you find the writing of this book, did it help you process some of your own fears and issues with, being a creative in the world we live in, not just, well,
Yeah.
everything? Everything,'s a mess.
Yes.
Did you find that writing a messy world helped with that?
I don't know if it helped or if I just was able to look at it a little bit clearer by kind of articulating it throughout the book. Um, but at no point does anything do the big issues that we're facing now, that teens are facing now, do they get resolved? Because there isn't necessarily a simple solution. But it's good to talk about these things, and I thought it was important to write about. I think it's when it comes to writing science fiction, and especially contemporary science fiction, there's only so much you can do without the scope of social issues that are currently plaguing our society now. So I have to address those things, and as a Black writer, I have to address those things. As a marginalized, as a mental health advocate, and somebody who suffers from mental illness, I have to talk about these things in a way that's coherent and also can make readers feel seen and represented and feel like, yeah, okay, I've never seen a big Black girl who suffers through all these different things who gets to be the main character and go on an adventure and get a love interest. I never saw that before, so it was good to write about that and to talk about the social issues and to talk about the little things that and microaggressions that she would experience that makes her kind of embittered to the world she's in. And because of that, it was good for me too. It was not so much helpful, but it was healthy. It was a nice, healthy way to talk about things that have been bothering me. But every book I write, I try to be very clear with what I'm trying to express, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I know that I'm writing for an audience that wants to be direct and wants to be like, yeah, okay, why should she want to save the world? There's not always a chosen one who wants to just be like, I'm gonna save the day. Um, it has to be, there's got to be a lot of reasons behind this, and there has to be that kind of thought process of, I've experienced a lot of bad things. How do I find a way to want to make the world good? And can I be that person? And I
Yeah.
think those questions don't get asked a lot in some of these books. And I wanted to write a story where that was asked, and maybe there isn't a very clear cut solution to it.
Yeah. So, a question for fun.
Okay.
If you had to create a secret library and you had a very limited space, what are the top 3 books that you would have to include in your secret library?
That's very mean. That's a very mean question. And it would be a really hard one because,
You can name 3 series. For the record, I will accept that. That is not
okay,
cheating in my mind.
it's really hard because I have so many books that I absolutely love. And my favorite books kind of change every few weeks because I'm like, oh, this is my new favorite. And then like I'm not just that person who like loves so many books. But for this year, I would say that Crown Chasers by Rebecca Coffindaffer was amazing. Rebel Wing by Andrea Tang and Goddess in the Machine by Laura Beth Johnson were all amazing and really, really beautiful. But then at the same time, it would be very difficult to not include Legendborn by Tracy Dion and Glitch Kingdom by Sheena Bookwick and A Song Below Water by Bethany C. Morrow. And it really, I have to stop. So I don't know. I guess I would just take the 3 that are closest to me at that point because it's
Just
way
grab
too
3
hard.
books and run.
Yeah, it's way
They're
too
off your
hard.
shelf. You know you'll like them, so.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for that question. Now I'm going to be up all night thinking, did I answer that right? Because I missed so many books. Oh, the anxiety of it. But there are so many amazing books, and I don't know. I would struggle. I would struggle to pick 3. I mean, Ellie has like 62, so I feel like she's doing all right.
And
That's
I
what's terrible.
assume as a librarian, you've got her whole list. You know exactly what books she has.
Yeah, I know what she's got. I know what she has hidden in a mattress in her basement. I know what's in there. And some of them are books that I've read and I love, and some of them are books that I think she would have learned at school, which I didn't. Um, and that's just how it is. Like, I wanted to look at books that are more modern, that a 16-year or 17-year-old would be like, yeah, that's awesome. But me as an adult would be like, oh, that's good. But is it my favorite? I don't know. So it's really different. We have different tastes, but at the same time, very similar tastes.
Yeah, I think that's important when establishing a character, especially when you're, an adult writing YA. Like,
Yeah.
what the kids are doing these days is different. It's TikTok
Exactly.
apparently or something. I don't know. I'm old now. Uh, all right, so let's reel things in a bit. The one question that I really like to tie together all of these interviews with is how would you like to see representation of disability? And in your case specifically, I would love for you to speak to representation of mental illness change in our media in the next few years, let's say the next 5 to 10 years.
I really would love to see authors who share that marginalization get the opportunities to, one, write these books and publish these books and not have to go against authors who do not have that marginalization and don't understand the nuance of these characters, or the mental illness they're struggling with, or the disability they're struggling with, and they do well. I don't understand this for a lot of reasons. I do not understand why abled authors are writing disabled characters, and they're missing, or they're stereotyping, or they're just not representing it the best they could because they don't understand it. And I can't say that you can't write it. I will never say that somebody shouldn't write something, but I will say I will not recommend, and I will not read a book about a disabled character by a non-disabled author. I just won't do it. And there's a reason for it, because I think they're, especially for teens, it can be very harmful to read these things. And in one way, I remember when I was a teenager and I was always overweight, plus size my entire life. And it wasn't until I was older that I understood that I have a very rare disease, and that's just how it is. But when I was reading these books about fat characters, they were all slovenly, they were all slobs, they ate too much, they did all of these things, and it made me feel like that's what I was doing. And it would get to a point where I didn't want to read, and I felt horrible about myself. Now, that's just an example. When you're doing that for other disabilities, it's, can you, it's like, it's just so harmful for readers. And I don't feel comfortable writing something that I don't experience, unless unless it's something that I know very, very well and it's still within my lane. And I think staying within your lane is really important when it comes to writing stories about characters that are dealing with things you've never dealt with, or that haven't been represented well in media for a long time or at all. And there are amazing authors who are doing that now or getting the chance, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. And I want to see more, more of all of these, all everybody. I want to see everybody more represented, and I want them to be represented by authors who have traditionally not had the opportunity to do that. So that's where I'm coming from on it. I really want to see just so much more.
Absolutely. And I think it would be nice to, see that happening in the traditional publishing lane. That's the place where
Yeah.
I see it really lacking. Most of the authors I've interviewed here have on this podcast have been published by one of a handful of small presses.
Yeah.
And I think it's time for big publishing to stop and pay attention. Not that they're good
Think
at
it's
that.
No, it's a very slow process. I mean, I have bipolar disorder, and I know that there are a lot of books about people with bipolar disorder and movies about it. written by people who have not suffered bipolar disorder, and for a lot of reasons, these people always end up the villain, or they always end up as the person who is just completely chaotic, and you can't understand them, and they in traditional publishing they don't get their due, or they don't get published. So, and I've met other bipolar authors who who write amazing books that totally speak to me, and I get them and I love them, and then a publishing is like, no, we don't understand this character, so no. And you're like,
Yeah.
what? But a
Yeah.
person who has this will totally understand that. And I think we should be able to do this, where we're publishing these books, because people who don't understand can actually finally get a glimpse of how we operate without judgment, and just understanding. And that's what I really want to have happen. And it boggles my mind that this is what we're up against, that people are happy to push people out there, and to give a big push for books written by non-marginalized authors and non-disabled and non mentally ill authors, featuring characters with all these things, mind you, but they don't allow authors who have these things to publish these books, or push them out there. So it's very confusing to me, and it displeases me a lot, and I'm really hoping that that changes within the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I know so many very skilled writers with disabilities, and actually, I know quite a few skilled writers specifically with bipolar. And it's like, if you just let these people write
Yeah.
the stories that you have about people with bipolar would be a lot better. Uh,
It's not always just so black and white. There's a lot within the experience, and it's different for everyone, but there's so much within that experience that isn't just mania or depression. There's so much in there, and it's very displeasing and really disappointing that publishing hasn't caught up with that yet.
yeah. On the other hand, there is one difficulty with this, and something that I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen on the internet in the last few months, which is authors being forced to come forward as disabled or mentally ill or traumatized in some way in order to, you know, be seen as representing their characters correctly and to not get shade. Can you speak a bit to that, how you navigate that as both a reader and a writer?
It's really weird. Like, I don't know, like, can you imagine that you're not able to write a certain thing without disclosing that you are this one thing? And there's two sides to this. One, because if you are disabled, and you can be like, yeah, I'm disabled, so why do I need to disclose that to you? Why does it have to be labeled as own voices? But these are things that in library science we call this invisible patrons, right? An invisible patron is somebody who comes into the library wanting a book about a subject that would represent them, but we aren't able to know what that book is or what that subject is. But we need to make sure that we have all of these books on those subjects, so that they are able to find that and have that for themselves. We always want to cater to invisible patrons as much as we cater to the visible ones. So, saying that, it's hard because I don't have to disclose that I'm bipolar to write a bipolar book. And nobody would know that about me unless I said, yeah, I'm bipolar. Should I have to do that? No. Therein lies the problem. It's very difficult to go, okay, where do I have to disclose that? And is it my job to disclose that? And sometimes it's yes, but there's sometimes it's just, I don't know. It's very complicated to me, and I don't know if there's a solution to this. Um, for the most part, I think when we are writing books representing a certain thing that we have experienced and we identify with, we are usually more outgoing about why we should be the ones to write this anyway. When I'm writing a book for a fat black girl, I can be like, because I'm a fat black girl, and that's how it is, and I don't really want to have any more conversation about that. But not everybody should have to do that, and I don't know where the line will be or where it's going to be drawn. I feel people should be able to be comfortable sharing what they want to share, or that's just how it should be in publishing. But I just don't know if publishing is ready for that kind of, okay, I don't need to label this as own voices, but I also don't want to have to argue later on with anybody about why this author wrote this book or why I chose this book. And it's very difficult, but we've seen the flip side of it, right? Where somebody is like, I'm going to write this book about, Hawaiian culture, and I'm not Hawaiian at all. And you're like, then why did you do it? So I think it's going to be like an honor system at some point, but I don't know if we can ever trust some people to be honorable. It's very strange. So I don't know. That's the long and short of it. I have no idea. Yes.
Fair enough. It is uncharted territory.
Yes.
We are figuring our shit out.
Yes.
I completely understand that. That's sort of where I fall on it too, is, it's a very complex issue. I certainly think bullying an author into disclosing things about their identity is really gross.
Yes.
But like there's also definitely a book does become much more appealing to me if I know that you're writing it out of your experience.
And it's so hard to be like, why? Like, I don't understand how we make that distinction, but it is also true that I prefer things to be from somebody who understands that representation and why it's important for it to be valid in its own way. But it is not my job to police their representation at all. So it's a very confusing kind of situation, and I'm not sure wherein the solution will come from. But I hope that people will be careful when they are writing and representing people who are not within their lane. That's all I can really hope for.
Yeah.
And I just have to hope that everybody who feels comfortable will feel comfortable representing and doing what they want to do within the book community.
Well said. All right. So we are running out of time.
Oh, no.
What is next for you, and where can people go to find out more about you?
So next for me, I am coming out with a book called The Kindred in 2022. So I think around, I don't know, early 2022, February, March. And it is Ben Solo, me plus Ray, mental connection, best friends falling and crashing to Earth, running away from where they're from. And it's it's a love story, and it's about humanity, as always. And that will be out. And then I am going to have a short story featured in Out There, which is done by Sandra Mitchell. And hopefully that will also come out in May of 2022. So 2022 is my year, I think.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, and you can find me online at AlechiaDow.com. That's my website, which is AlechiaDow.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Alechia Writes, AlechiaWrites. And I'm also on Instagram as Alechia Dow. So that's where I'm at. Come find me. Love to say hi.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been a delight chatting with you, and I'm very excited to receive my copy of The Sound of Stars.
I hope you'll like it.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Spoonie Authors Podcast. The Spoonie Authors Podcast is part of the Spoonie Authors Network, a community initiative devoted to sharing the stories of disabled authors and educating abled people about what life is like for disabled creatives. Transcripts of this podcast are also available on the Spoonie Authors Network. To learn more or become a contributor, visit SpoonieAuthorsNetwork.blog. And of course, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure to leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast streaming platform.